Let's talk about how investors make decisions on whether or not to invest in your startup. And I'm going to be sharing from my own experience sitting on both sides of the table as the founder seeking investment, as well as the investor making a decision on whether to invest. Also, the general partner on whether to take that startup to the investment committee and let other partners decide on whether or not to invest in that startup. Let me start by saying, straight out, being very direct, all decisions start as emotional. And this is important. Why is it important? Because I think a lot of founders think in their minds that investors are making rational decisions up front, but you have to understand it starts as an emotional decision, and then investors look for the rational justifications. They rationalize it, due diligence, technical parameters, fundamentals, to decide on whether or not it backs up their emotional decision. And founders, you need to learn this because I think founders start to take things personally, or they start to try and argue from a rational perspective. But really, you founders are arguing from an emotional perspective and you're trying to make it rational, and it's oil and water. There's conflict, there's cognitive dissonance. It's not going to work. Let me share more about that. Before we do, welcome to Founder Friday. This is when I take the time to talk to my community, talk to you as a founder direct, and we have a conversation, and I'm a little more open, transparent, and vulnerable. I give you no unfiltered talk about my experience as an advisor, as a founder myself, and maybe talk about the experiences that you're going through. What brought this talk on was my YouTube Angel Investment Fund, where I'm trying to make a decision on where to put all my YouTube ad revenue and some money from other investors who have committed to match or take a look at the investments, looking for my deal flow. I'm making decisions, and this week I sent out a whole bunch of rejection emails and saying it's a pass, and I'm just very straightforward. I'm not going to string you along. As soon as I read every single one of these applications, I click on the links, and I try and make a decision, and I don't want you to get the wrong signal or misinterpret it, as well as if you're working with other investors who say no to you. I want to equip you to give you some perspective so you understand how to take that type of rejection and how to respond. Because I've had some founders give me an amazing response, and I've had some founders give me a very poor, inappropriate response that gives me more emotions on not wanting to work with you as a founder. So you don't want to be in the latter category, you want to be in the former category. Let's talk about how decisions are made. If you look at your brain and how it is wired, everything goes through the emotional part of your brain first. All signals travel through the reptilian part of your brain, the limbic system, the emotional library of your brain, then get to the higher functioning parts of the brain, if that's what you want to call them, such as the neocortex, the prefrontal lobes, where all the executive function and all the thinking happens, all the rational thinking happens, but everything starts off with emotions. Imagine if you're going shopping and you're going window shopping and you see a pair of shoes that look really good or a jacket in a window. The first thing you're going to do is make an emotional decision. I like that. That looks good to me. Something about those shoes or the jacket or whatever's in that display speaks to me. And now you're going to rationalize. What's the cost? Do I need a jacket? What's the style? And you're going to say, hey, maybe I bought a jacket last week, or maybe I've got some extra money. You're going to be thinking about all the facts and information to help you complete that decision-making process. And that's why you get buyer's remorse. People make an emotional decision. I want it, they buy it, and then 24 hours later thinking about it and they say, why did I do that? I don't want to buy it anymore. I never wanted to, and I want to return it. Happens all the time. And investors cannot afford to fall into buyer's remorse because the check's already been written, the paperwork's already done and sent out. You got to make that work. And startups are a very risky proposition. Understand this. Startups are a subset of an investment class. There's private equity, and then there's venture capital in non-traditional assets, alternative assets that are very risky. Startup investing is not mainstream because it's so risky. 90% of startups fail after they're funded, and 99% of startups never get VC funding. So there's a lot of choice out there, and there's not the same amount of money to go around. And every investor is looking for quality deal flow to invest in to 10x to 50x, maybe even 100x their money. And all the startups out there, all the founders, you think about how many founders there are. I think like something like ridiculous, like 100 million businesses get started every single year. That's a lot. And a lot of them are looking for funding and they're not going to get it. Only 1% are going to get VC funding. So that means the founder has to convince the investor who's got investors themselves, the partner who's got LPs breathing down their neck and saying, you better not waste our money. We're expecting you to perform and get us a return. So that creates emotions as well. There's fear, there's pressure, which leads to fear or FOMO, fear of missing out if they miss an investment, or greed because they have to provide a return. They want their money working for them. All that comes into play. You have to acknowledge the position the investor is in just as much as I want investors to empathize and acknowledge the position that you are in. Now, let's get back to me. Let's say I send a founder a rejection email, and initially it's rejected based on emotions. There's a feeling, something stands out to that investor that I go, no, I don't want to do this one. I lack confidence. I feel insecure. There's fear that I'm going to make the wrong decision. And it might be the worst decision that I made. It might be the best startup to invest in. You might be the best founder in the world, building a baby unicorn, sitting in a rocket ship, ready to go parabolic to the moon, and I'm still going to say no because I make emotional decisions. Investors make emotional decisions. Now, the opposite occurs. I see something in the application and I go, yeah, something speaks to me. And then I get emotional about it, good emotions, I get good vibes. And then I go through due diligence and I check the metrics, the fundamentals. I check the facts and I make sure that they support the emotional decision that I'm about to make. It's even emotional if I'm going to send you onward to my investment committee or I'm going to refer you to other investors. That's an emotional relationship. Sure, there are fundamentals at play, but after I get through that fear, am I giving the right referral? Am I giving off the right impression? Is this going to maintain the relationship? Then we get into the rational stuff. Let's dig into the numbers. Let's do the spreadsheets. Let's figure out the rubrics and do all the due diligence necessary to make a rational technical decision, because that's what I have investment committee for. That's why I have advisors myself. And I say, I really like this founder. There's something about this founder that I really like. Give me your analysis on this. Let me know. I was meeting with a founder just the other day, and I got emotionally invested in this founder, and I was ready to sign a check. I was ready to at least buy the product and start using the product. But I said, no, I can't make decisions based on this alone, but this is enough to send you to the next round. And what do? I set that founder up with a meeting with my angel investor, called that angel investor, and I said, I'm sending you this founder. This is what they're doing. I soft pitched him on the phone. I said, are you interested? He said, yeah, let's take a look. And I said, you will know better than me if this is technically or fundamentally sound. I want you to look through the demo. I want you to beat this founder up so that I can be justified in my initial feeling, that gut feeling that I had with the founder, that something spoke to me about that founder, and I do this all the time. Now, don't get me wrong. I make the poorest decisions ever that I regret. Let's talk about cryptocurrency. Let's talk about Bitcoin. Many years ago, I made the right decision when it came to Bitcoin. When Bitcoin was going down, I kept buying and buying and buying, and everybody was looking at me like, I can't believe that you're doing this, especially my wife, because she was scared. Our money was going into that investment, very speculative, but there was something in there that I was like, yeah, I really like Bitcoin. And then I did all the research, and all the research justified my decision. Well, guess what now? Everybody's happy. I've got friends and family. They're all invested in Bitcoin, and they're thanking me. Whereas before, they're looking at me funny, and I was working them through their emotions. I had people really get upset with me when Bitcoin dropped, and I said, just keep buying. This is what I'm going to do. Not financial advice, but this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep buying. And if you think the same way that I do, you're going to keep buying. And they're thanking me now. But others that got afraid, they got out of the investment. And now they're like, I should have hung on. I should have listened to you. But the opposite has also occurred. I had an opportunity to invest in a cryptocurrency project called Axie Infinity at a very early stage. And I looked at it and I thought, there's something interesting here, but I think it might be a dumb idea. And I'm a little unsure. So I showed it to my kids and I said, would you play this video game? They said, no, etc. And it went all over the place. And I was thinking about it. And I think I had an opportunity to get in at like 15 cents or something like that. If you go look up Axie Infinity, man, I regret it because where that ballooned to, oh my goodness, it was crazy. And I didn't even take a look at the fundamentals, though they were presented in front of me. And rationally, there were so many good things that I saw in it, but emotionally, I couldn't pull the trigger. And emotionally, I regret it now. but I don't cry over it. I've moved on. Same thing has occurred when I'm pitching investors. They make an emotional decision. There's something in me that they don't like. Maybe they don't resonate with my problem or the industry, or maybe they had a bad experience. There's just something that we're just not connecting, and they say, we're going to pass. I've had people say to me, Ed, we think that fundamentally this is a great company and you're going to make millions of dollars, but there's something in here that's bugging us. And they decide to pass. And I go, okay. Now, some of them I've convinced. I say, what do you need to see so that you can change your opinion on it, and we negotiate and work through? And that's the reaction that I want you to have. But other times they go, it's just a pass. We might have been wrong. Y Combinator sent me emails like that. It's a pass. We get this wrong all the time. And you know what I do? I move on to the other investor, or I work on the feedback and I figure out what do I need to do to change their mind. But some of you founders out there are sending me responses that are highly inappropriate, combative, and you're saying, okay, rationally, Ed, you're making the wrong decision, and here's why, and you're just turning me off emotionally. You're getting to the place where I don't want to talk to you anymore, and I see founders argue with me, and I say, yeah, I could be making the worst decision. Technically, your startup could be the best investment that will make everybody a ton of money. A lot of people passed on Airbnb because they just couldn't get it, and they thought emotionally, this is kind of like renting your couch out to an axe murderer. They regret it. And in hindsight, you can see all these LinkedIn posts. If you would have invested in Airbnb, all these rejections, you would have been worth millions of dollars, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. Well, hindsight is 2020, and hindsight is based on rationality. But up front, we have to make emotional decisions. So when I get an investor make an emotional decision, I go, okay, I move on. I don't argue with it, and nor should you. It's not personal, and you're taking it personal. And if you argue with me and you rationalize and you say, Ed, you're making a bad choice, a dumb decision, I go, okay, I'm going to live with it. That's what investors have to think about. And I have to look back and say, I'm glad I invested in Bitcoin. I regret not investing in Axie Infinity, because if I did, I would be able to write checks to all the founders out there. Well, guess what? I did the same thing with real estate, with houses, with other types of investments that I should have gotten into, or other startups that I divested out of too quick, stock market, everything. That's the investor's plight, and we're driven by emotions throughout our history, and hopefully as investors, we learn to control our emotions. And you as a founder need to do the exact same thing when you get emotional about the response from an investor. There's nothing personal to do with it other than there's an emotion that I go, you as a founder, I just don't want to invest. There's something in there that I'm not going to take you to the next level, the socialization round or the due diligence round, and that's okay. Another investor might not have the same emotional response, and they'll go into more due diligence, and that's fine. But let's say you stick with me. Let's say you continue. As one founder I talked to yesterday, my main man, Andrew Thompson, giving a shout out to him. As I was talking to him, he said something that clicked an emotional trigger in me. He said, this is for blue collar workers. And he used a specific term, and I said, my goodness, this makes a lot of sense. Blue collar workers. And I thought, man, there's a lot of TAM, and this is a hard problem, and I resonate with blue collar worker problems with technology. Well, I don't need fundamentals or technical analysis to know that blue collar workers is a massive, massive TAM, and the way that AI is going and laying off white collar workers, the creative management class, whatever you want to call them, blue collar is on the rise. Yeah, I see all the numbers, but the way Andrew said it to me gave me the feels. It hit me right in the feels, and I said, I'm getting excited. And then I went into due diligence, and I asked him a whole bunch of questions to say, okay, how can we get to the next round? But then Andrew said something really interesting. He said, if I'm not chosen, will you still work with me? How can we work together? And he was opening up that relationship, and that even gave me more feels and got me more bullish on working with Andrew, because he's coming across to me as the type of founder that I would love to be friends with. I'd love to hang out with. I could see myself interacting with him every day. He gave me positive emotions. He gave me a positive feel, and that was the executive presence, which I've talked about in other segments here about why investors don't like you. Well, that's an emotional decision to keep working with him. And let's say I say no to a founder and they say, let me show you how much we've done in 6 months. They're resilient. You as a founder, you're resilient. You keep plugging away. You have an intensity of execution that impresses me. You stay absolutely 100% convicted, and you start to show by those convictions that you stay motivated and you get that traction. Well, my emotions are going to be more impressed. I'm going to say, wow, I thought this wasn't going to happen before, but now you showed me something and it's hitting me in the feels. Let's move into due diligence. But if you come at me and you're arguing all the time, you're saying, Ed, you're dumb. You're making dumb decisions. That's not rational. Guess what? You're being emotional and you're making me feel emotional. And that is a recipe for disaster. That's not going to work. I'm just being so open and transparent. This is how investors decide. At the highest levels of executive management, the higher you go, the more emotional decisions are made. Trust me, you would think people at the highest levels of performance inside huge companies will make rational decisions. Oh, believe you me, I'm the executive coach for CEOs that have to deal with tens of millions of dollars in budget and handle trillions of dollars of business in transactions. And those decisions are emotional. Trust me. That's the reason I'm an executive coach. I know how to work those CEOs through those emotions. Investors are the same way. Maybe they're not upfront as I am with you and tell you what's going on, but trust me, investors get emotional. I saw an email, a totally emotional email from an investor, because I send out hundreds of emails a day on behalf of founders, and it came back, and that email was so inappropriate. That founder was triggered, and it was all laced with emotions, and that caused the founder emotions. And I said, that is not an investor I will ever refer anybody to. They're not being upfront with it, and they're not in control. They're not regulating their emotions, and they took it out on the founder. And guess what? That investor is not going to get any deal flow. And they may be thinking, well, Ed, I don't care about your deal flow. You're just a small little tiny piece in my big chessboard. You're just a small little bug. You're just a nuisance. But how do you know? How do you know I'm not going to discover the next Airbnb, the next Uber, the next Facebook, the next whatever AI, the next Sam Altman could be watching the channel right now. You could be the next Sam Altman, and we're going to get a relationship, and you are going to start $1 billion company. How do you know? And do you want to take that risk? Do you want to take the risk and let the emotions get out of control for the future? No, you do not. So my takeaway is work on that emotion, that control, understand how decisions start emotionally, and work with that, and then follow it up with the rational decision making that we all need to do, but leave room for those feels and learn how to regulate that and conduct yourself properly for those investors. And believe me, you will be successful. Eventually, every founder that sticks with it is successful in some way or another. That could be you. Thanks for hanging out with me. Check out the other videos on my channel. Appreciate it. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. I'll see you in the next video.